Hello everyone. I wish you doing well. Today we'll all talk about Adolf Hitler. Or Hitler. Adolf Hitler is a German Nazi politician, born in Austria, and leader and founder of the National Socialist German Workers' Party known as the Nazi Party. He ruled Germany between 1933 and 1945, where he served as State Chancellor, German, Reichskanzler, between 1933 and 1945, and Führer, German, Führer, between 1934 and 1945. Time magazine named him one of 100 personalities that made the greatest impact in human history in the 20th century. As one of the veterans who won medals in appreciation of their efforts in World War I alongside Germany, Hitler joined the Nazi Party in 1920 and became its leader in 1921. After his imprisonment following a failed coup attempt in 1923, Hitler managed to win support of the masses by encouraging the ideas of support for nationalism, anti-communism and the charisma that he enjoys in delivering speeches and propaganda. In 1933 he was appointed Chancellor of the country, where he worked to lay the foundations of a system governed by totalitarianism, dictatorship, and fascism. Hitler pursued a foreign policy with a stated goal, which was to seize what he called the vital area, in German, Lebensraum, intended to control certain areas to secure the existence of Nazi Germany and ensure its economic prosperity, and direct state resources towards achieving this goal. The German army were matched that Hitler rebuilt invaded Poland in 1939, which led to the outbreak of World War II, and within 3 years, Germany and the Axis powers occupied most of the continent of Europe, except Britain, and large parts of Africa and the countries of Eastern and Southeast Asia and the Pacific Rim, a third of the Soviet Union from the west to Stalingrad. However, the Allies succeeded in finally gaining the upper hand. Some historians view Hitler as a unique figure in German history who tried to improve the political and economic conditions of the German people during his reign. On the other side, other historians consider Hitler to be one of the bloodiest figures in recent history, as his policies killed millions of civilians and military personnel during World War II. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889 in Brno in the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Hitler was the fourth son of 6 children. As for his father, it was Alois Hitler (1837–1903), who was a customs official, and his mother Clara Hitler (1860–1907) was the third wife of his father. And since the true identity of Alois's father formed a mysterious secret in the history of the Third Reich, it was impossible to determine the relationship. The real biology that linked Alois and Clara was what required their papal exemption to complete their marriage. Among the 6 children, the fruit of Alois and Clara's marriage, Adolf and his sister Paula, who was 7 years younger than him, did not reach adolescence. Alois had another son, Alois Hitler, son and daughter, Angela, from his second wife. Hitler had a troubled childhood. His father was so violent in his treatment of him and his mother that even Hitler himself stated that he was usually beaten in his boyhood by his father. Years later, Hitler spoke to his business manager, saying, "I then decided not to cry again when my father came up with a whip. A few days later I had the opportunity to put my will to the test. As for my mother, I stood in terror, hiding behind the door. Silently, I counted the number of blows that were falling on my ass." Historians believe that the history of the family violence that Hitler's father practiced against his mother was referred to in part of his book Mein Kampf, in which Hitler described a detailed description of the incident of domestic violence committed by a husband against his wife. This incident, in addition to the beating incidents that his father was doing against him, explains the reason for the deep emotional connection between Hitler and his mother at a time when he was very resentful of his father. Hitler's family often moved from one place to another, as they moved from Brno am Inn to Besso, Lampach and Linding near Linz. Hitler's child was a top student in his elementary school, but he failed in 6th grade, his first year in high school when he lived in Linz, and he had to repeat this school year. His teachers said about him that he does not want to work. For 1 year Hitler was in the same classroom with Ludwig Wittgenstein, who is considered one of the most influential philosophers of the 20th century. Although the boys were about the same age, Wittgenstein was 2 years ahead of Hitler. It was not confirmed whether Hitler and Wittgenstein knew each other at the time, and neither did they remember one another. Commenting on this, Hitler stated that his educational stumbling stems from his rebellion against his father, who wanted him to follow his example and be a customs official despite Hitler's desire to be a painter. Hitler's explanation supports that description, which he later described himself as an artist who misunderstood him. After Alois' death on January 3, 1903, Hitler's academic level did not improve. But Hitler left high school at the age of 16 without obtaining his degree. The propaganda of the Allied forces took advantage of Hitler's original family name during World War II, and their aircraft were conducting airdrops to German cities for leaflets bearing the phrase Heil Hitler Gruber as a reminder of the Germans' lineage. Although Hitler was born legally bearing the name Hitler, he was also associated with the name of Heidler by his maternal grandfather, John Heidler. In his book My Fight, Hitler attributed his conversion to German nationalism to his early teenage years, in which he read a book from his father's books on the Franco-Prussian War, and which made him question the reasons why his father and other Germans of Austrian descent failed to defend Germany during the war. Hitler's father, Alois Hitler, was an illegitimate baby. During the first 39 years of his life, Alois held the nickname for his mother's family, that of Hitlergruber. The propaganda of the Allied forces took advantage of Hitler's original family name during World War II, and their aircraft were conducting airdrops to German cities for leaflets bearing the phrase Heil Hitler Gruber as a reminder of the Germans' lineage. Although Hitler was born legally bearing the name Hitler, he was also associated with the name of Heidler by his maternal grandfather, John Heidler. Hitler's paternal grandfather was probably one of the two brothers Johann Georg Hitler or Johann Nepomuk Hitler. It was rumored that Hitler was affiliated with the Jews through one of his grandparents, because his grandmother Maria Schicklgruber had become pregnant while working as a housemaid in a Jewish home. The meaning of these rumors created a tremendous political thunder, as Hitler was an enthusiastic supporter of racist and anti-Semitic ideologies. His opponents tried hard to prove Hitler's lineage to Jewish or Czech origins. Although these rumors never proved true, they were sufficient for Hitler to conceal his origins. According to Robert G. L. White in his book The Mentally Disordered God, Adolf Hitler, Hitler forcefully prohibited the work of German women in Jewish homes. After annexing Austria to Germany, Hitler converted the city in which his father lived to his artillery training ground. Beginning in 1905, Hitler lived a bohemian life in Vienna on a government grant for orphanage and financial support that his mother was providing him. He was refused admission twice at the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna in 1907 and 1908 because he was not suitable for the field of painting, and they told him that it was better for him to direct his abilities to the field of architecture. His memoirs reflected his fascination with the subject. The purpose of my trip was to study the paintings in the museum's showroom called the Court Museum. But I rarely looked at anything other than the museum itself. From morning until late at night, I was moving between the exhibits that caught my attention, but it was always the buildings that took all my attention. On December 21, 1907, Hitler's mother died of breast cancer at the age of 47. By order of a court in Linz, Hitler gave his share of the government subsidy to orphans to his sister Paula. When he was 21 years old, Hitler inherited money from one of his aunts, and tried to find his way as an illustrator in Vienna as he was copying the landscape on postcards and selling his paintings to merchants and tourists, and after the Academy of Arts rejected him for the second time. His money has been implemented. In 1909, Hitler lived in a homeless shelter. By 1910, Hitler had settled in a house in which the poor working-class people lived in Austria's Milmenstrasse. Hitler stated that his belief in anti-Semitism first appeared in Vienna, in which a large Jewish community, including Orthodox Jews, had fled the organized massacres in Russia. In spite of this, one of his childhood friends, August Kopzek, stated that Hitler's confirmed anti-Semitism tendencies appeared before Lenz left in Austria. During this period, Vienna was a breeding ground for the spirit of traditional religious bias, as well as for the racism that emerged in the 19th century. Hitler may have been influenced by the writings of Franz von Liebenfels, the author of anti-Semitic theories, as well as the opinions of polemicists such as Karl Lueger, founder of the Christian Socialist Party and mayor of Vienna, as well as music composer Richard Wagner and George Ritter von Schoner, a leader of the nationalist movement. German, which was known as Far From Rome, a movement that appeared in Europe in the 19th century and was aimed at uniting the peoples that speak German in Europe. In his book Mein Kampf claims that his conversion from the idea of opposing anti-Semitism from a religious point of view to her support from a racist standpoint came from his contact with the Orthodox Jews, and if this interpretation is correct, it is clear that Hitler was not acting according to this new belief. He often hosted a dinner at the home of a Jewish nobleman in addition to his great ability to interact with Jewish merchants who were trying to sell his paintings. Hitler claimed that the Jews were enemies of the Aryan race. He also blamed the Jews for the crisis in Austria. He managed to identify specific forms of socialism and Bolshevism that many Jewish leaders claim, as a type of Jewish movement, to integrate anti-Semitism with anti-Marxism. Subsequently, Hitler blamed the defeat of the German army during World War I over the revolutions of 1918 and then accused the Jews of the crime of causing the loss of Germany's colonial goals, as well as of causing the economic problems that ensued. In light of the turbulent scenes that took place in Parliament during the era of the Austrian multinational monarchy, Hitler decided that the democratic parliamentary system was not valid. Nevertheless, according to August Kubetsk, who once shared the same room, that Hitler was more interested in opera than Wagner wrote more than he was interested in his political views. Hitler received the last part of his father's property in May 1913, after which he moved to Munich. Hitler wrote Inch. He was always yearning for life in a real German city. And in Munich, Hitler became more interested in architecture, as Hitler put it in the writings of Houston Stewart Chamberlain. His move to Munich also helped him evade military service in Austria for some time, although the police in Munich, which had been working in cooperation with the Austrian authorities, were eventually able to arrest him. After he was physically examined and petitioned for remorse for what he had committed, it was decided that he was not fit to perform military service, because he was apparently very meager at the time, and allowed to return to Munich. However, when Germany entered World War I in August 1914, Hitler petitioned King of Bavaria Ludwig III to allow him to serve in the army. Indeed, the king agreed to his plea, and Adolf Hitler was conscripted into the Bavarian army. Hitler served in France and Belgium with the 16th Bavarian Reserve Regiment, which was known as the List Regiment, after his first commander. The war ended with his rank as Jeffreiter, a rank equivalent to a corporal agent in the British Army and a first-class soldier in the American armies. Hitler worked as a messenger among armies. It was one of the most dangerous jobs on the Western Front, and was often vulnerable to enemy fire. He also participated in a number of major battles on the Western Front, and these battles included the First Battle of Ypres, the Battle of the Somme, the Battle of Arras, and the Battle of Basketball. The Battle of Ypres took place in October 1914, which saw about 40,000 soldiers killed in 20 days, which is between a third and a half of the number of soldiers involved. As for the battalion that Hitler was a member of, the number had decreased from 250 soldiers to 42 by December. Autobiography writer John Keegan wrote that this experience had made Hitler tend to isolate and withdraw himself during the remainder of the war. Hitler and Samian were given credit for his courage in the war, where he was awarded the Order of the Iron Cross of the Second Degree in 1914, and he also was awarded the Order of the Iron Cross of the First Degree in 1918, a tribute rarely received by a soldier of the rank of Gefreiter. However, Hitler was not promoted to the rank of Unteroffizier, a rank equivalent to corporal in the British Army, because he lacked leadership skills from the viewpoint of the commanders of his regiment. Some other historians say that the reason he was not promoted was because he was not a German citizen. The tasks Hitler had been assigned to military headquarters were usually risky, but they allowed him to continue producing his artwork. Hitler drew caricatures and educational drawings for an army newspaper. In 1916, Hitler was wounded, either in the area of the origin of the thigh, or in his left thigh. while participating in the Battle of the Somme, but he returned to the front again in March of 1917. He received the Badge of the Wounded later that same year. Sebastian Haffner referred to Hitler's experience on the front, explaining that it allowed him, at the very least, to understand military life. On October 15, 1918, Hitler was admitted to a field hospital following a temporary blindness after being attacked by mustard gas. The English psychologist David Lewis as well as Bernard Horstmann point out that Hitler's blindness may be the result of a transformational disorder, which was known at the time as hysteria. Hitler followed this incident and said that during this experiment he became convinced that the reason for his existence in life was to save Germany. Some scholars, especially Lucy Davidovich, are trying to prove that Hitler's intention to exterminate European Jews was entirely entrenched in his mind at the time, despite his instability in the way he would be able to do this. Most historians believe that this decision was made in 1941, while others believe that it was decided later in 1942. Hitler's admiration for Germany had long been dominated by him, and during the war he became a patriotic enthusiast with the greatest enthusiasm to defend Germany, even though he did not become a German citizen until 1932. Hitler saw war as the greatest experience one can experience in his life. Later, a number of his leaders praised him for his bravery. Hitler was shocked by the surrender agreement signed by Germany in November 1918, despite the German army's control of territory to the enemy until then. Like many pro-German nationalists, Hitler believed in the myth of the stab in the back and German Dolchstoss legend, who said that the army that had not been defeated on the battlefield had been stabbed in the back by civilian and Marxist leaders on the home front. These politicians were later known as November criminals. And the Treaty of Versailles deprived Germany of many areas that belonged to it, stripped the Rheinland region of its military character, and imposed other devastating economic sanctions on Germany. The treaty re-established the Polish state again, which was considered by the Germans, even moderates, as a form of insult. The treaty held Germany responsible for all the atrocities of war, something that prominent historians such as John Keegan now regard as at the very least an application of justice from the point of view of the victor party. Most of the European nations were increasingly overwhelmed by the military in the period leading up to World War I, and where these nations are eager to fight. Blaming Germany was the basis for imposing reforms on Germany, and the amount of these reforms has been frequently adjusted according to the plans known as the Dawes Plan, the Young Plan, and the Hoover Plan. As for Germany, it saw the treaty, especially Article 231 of it, specifically the paragraph that talks about Germany's responsibility for what happened in the war, was a kind of insult. For example, there was a complete demilitarization of the German armed forces that allowed them to retain only 6 battleships, and prevented them from maintaining submarines, air forces, armored vehicles, or an army of more than 100,000 soldiers except under conditions of forced recruitment. The Treaty of Versailles had an important role in the social and political conditions Hitler and his Nazi followers encountered while seeking to win power. Hitler and his party viewed the November criminals' signature of the treaty as a reason for them to build Germany again in a way that did not repeat what happened once again. Hitler used November criminals as a scapegoat, despite the very limited options that were available to these politicians at the Paris Peace Conference. After World War I ended, Hitler remained in the army and returned to Munich, where he participated in the military funeral held for the murdered Bavarian Prime Minister Kurt Eisner, in contrast to his declarations announced later. In the wake of the suppression of the Bavarian Soviet Republic, Hitler participated in the National Thought courses that were organized by the Education and Publicity Department of the Bavarian Community, which was called Reichswehr at the 4th Major Command Center under the supervision of Captain Karl Mayer. Blame has been placed on the Jewish people, whose members are spread all over the world, on the communists, and on politicians from all partisan affiliations, especially the Weimar Coalition. In July 1919, Hitler was appointed as a police spy, and he followed the intelligence command of the National Defense Forces Reichswehr in order to influence other soldiers and break through the ranks of a small party, the German Workers' Party, DAP. While exploring the party, Hitler was influenced by ideas the party's founder, Anton Drexler, is anti-Semitic, anti-capitalist, and anti-Marxist. His ideas supported the existence of a strong and active government. They were inspired by non-Jewish socialist ideas and from the belief in the necessity of a mutual solidarity between all members of society. Hitler's rhetorical skills also impressed Drexler and invited him to join the party to become the 55th member of it. Hitler also became the 7th member of the party's executive committee. Several years later, Hitler claimed to be the 7th founding member of the party. Hitler also met Dietrich Eckart, one of the founders of the party, and was a member of the underground society known as the Thule Society. Eckart became Hitler's tutor who taught him how to pick and tuck his clothes, and introduced him to a wide community of people. Hitler deeply thanked Eckart by praising him in the second volume of his book known as Mein Kampf. In an attempt to increase the party's popularity, the party changed its name to the National Socialist German Workers' Party. Hitler was demobilized from the army in March 1920, and, supported by the continued encouragement of party members with the highest ranks, he began to participate fully in party activities. Beginning in 1921, Hitler began to fully master the art of public speaking in front of large crowds. In February, Hitler spoke to a crowd of nearly 6,000 in Munich. To publicize this meeting, Hitler sent 2 trucks loaded with party supporters to roam the streets carrying a swastika, causing chaos as they threw small leaflets to the masses in the first implementation of their plan. Hitler's notorious reputation spread outside the party due to his crude character, his violent polemical rhetoric against the Versailles Treaty, and his rival politicians, including supporters of monarchy, pro-nationalists, and other socialists who did not believe in the politics of economic and political cooperation between states, and was particularly famous for his anti-Marxist and Jewish rhetoric. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, 51, was based in Munich. At the time, Munich was a fertile ground for German nationalists, including army officers who were determined to crush Marxism and undermine the foundations of the Weimar Republic, the republic that arose in Germany from 1919 to 1933 as a result of the First World War and the loss of Germany's war. Over time, Hitler and his ever-growing movement caught the attention of these officers as an appropriate tool to achieve their goals. In the summer of 1921, Hitler traveled to Berlin to visit some groups that advocated nationalism. In his absence, there was a state of rebellion among the leaders of the German Labour Party in Munich. The party was run by an executive committee whose main members viewed Hitler as an arrogant and authoritarian figure. These members formed an alliance with a group of socialists in the city of Augsburg. Hitler rushed back to Munich and tried to resist the fierce attack on him by formally resigning from the party on July 11 in 1920. When these members realized that their loss to Hitler would effectively mean the end of the party, Hitler seized the opportunity and announced the possibility of his return to the party provided that he replaced Drexler as president. The party has absolute influence in it. The angry party members, including Drexler, tried to defend their position at first. At the time, an anonymous pamphlet entitled Adolf Hitler, Is He a Traitor? To attack Hitler's thirst for power, he criticizes the clique of men wrapped around him who are violent. In response to the publication of this booklet about him in a Munich newspaper, Hitler filed a lawsuit for defamation, and later received a minor settlement with them. The executive committee of the German National Socialist Workers' Party eventually withdrew its position and admitted to its defeat, and party members voted to approve Hitler's demands. Hitler obtained the approval of 543 votes of members in exchange for rejection from only 1 vote. At the next party members' meeting held on July 29, 1921, Adolf Hitler was presented as Führer to the German National Socialist Workers' Party, the first time that this title was publicly announced. Speeches that Hitler was giving in the clubs where members of the German people met to attack Jews, Social Democrats, liberals, reactionary monarchists, capitalists, and communists came to fruition and attracted more supporters. He was a first supporter of Hitler, Rudolf Hess, former Air Force pilot Hermann Göring and Army Chief Ernst Röhm, who then became head of the Nazi paramilitary organization known as the SA Storm Battalion that took charge of meeting and attacking his political opponents. Hitler formed similar independent groups, the German Labour Front, which was based in Nuremberg. Julius Streicher was its president. and later served as a Gauleiter, meaning the leader of the regional branch of the German National Socialist Workers' Party in the region of Franconia. Moreover, Hitler caught the attention of local business stakeholders, and was accepted into circles that included influential people in the Munich city community. His name was also associated with the name of the military commander who was popular in the wartime period, General Erich Ludendorff. The Nazi Party forces attempted a coup against the government in 1923, but the attempt failed and ended with the imprisonment of Adolf Hitler, the party leader at the time. The Baer Hall coup was a failed coup attempt by Hitler with the Nazi Party to seize power in Bavaria and Germany. The coup attempt began from the evening of November 8 to the afternoon of November 9, 1923, and Adolf Hitler had decided to use the name of General Erich Ludendorff as a front in the coup attempt that ended in utter failure and imprisonment of the Nazi Party leader Adolf Hitler. By the time Hitler was released, the political situation in Germany had begun to calm down and economic conditions were improving, restricting Hitler's chances of agitating and pitting. Although Hitler's military coup may have earned him some national fame, the pillars of the party headed by Hitler remained in Munich. The activity of the German National Socialist Workers' Party and its members in Bavaria was banned after the coup failed. Hitler persuaded Heinrich Hilde, the Prime Minister of Bavaria, to lift this ban based on his allegations in which he emphasized that the party would now seek political power through legitimate channels. Although the ban on the German National Socialist Workers' Party was activated on February 16, 1925, Hitler had brought himself a new ban as a result of a fiery speech he gave that caused riots. Denial of public speaking. Hitler appointed Gregor Strasser, who was elected in 1924 to the Reichstag, German parliament, as the president of the Reich organization, and gave him the authority to organize the party in northern Germany. In addition to his younger brother Otto Strasser and Joseph Goebbels. Strasser took a course whose independence began to increase over time, thereby confirming the presence of the socialist component of the party's program. The leadership of the German Labour Front and its regional branch in northwest Germany has become an internal opposition front within the party, threatening Hitler's authority. However, this dissident clique was defeated at the Bamberg Conference in 1926, during which Goebbels joined Hitler. After this clash, Hitler increased the centralization of his power in the party. He emphasized the existence of the position of the party's primary leader as a position that makes him the primary responsible for organizing party affairs. Leaders are not elected by the groups that they lead, but their higher-ranking chiefs appoint them and also have the right to hold them accountable, while these leaders enjoy absolute obedience from those who are less central. In keeping with Hitler's contempt for the idea of democracy, he made all power and influence pass from top to bottom. The main factor in Hitler's increasing popularity among people was his ability to summon the spirit of national pride offered by the Versailles Treaty of Humiliation and imposed by the Western Allies on the defeated German Empire. Germany lost an economically important part of its territory in Europe along with its colonies. Acknowledging that he took full responsibility for the war, she agreed to pay a huge sum totaling approximately 132 billion German marks for the damage losses caused by the war. Most Germans bitterly resented the provisions of the treaty, but previous attempts by the Nazis to obtain the support of the German people by blaming the Jewish people all over the world were unacceptable to the electorate. The party soon learned the lesson, and a skillful propaganda began mixing anti-Semitism with an attack on the mistakes made by the Weimar system and the political parties loyal to it. After the failure of the coup led by Hitler to overthrow the Weimar Republic, Hitler pursued the legitimacy strategy. It meant formal compliance with the principles of the Weimar Republic until he took over the rule legally. Hence, he can use the institutions of the Weimar Republic to get rid of this republic and install himself as the dictator of the country. Some party members, especially representatives of the paramilitary Storm Battalion, opposed this strategy pursued by Hitler. Röhm and others scoffed at Hitler and called him the legal Adolf. Thanks for watching. Waited for us in the second part. What happened when Hitler came to power? Goodbye.